Hey guys, it's January 16th and this is Nick Franklin. I'm at the Wikispeed shop here in Linwood and I just wanted to show you what I've been working on right now. Basically we were trying to decide what kind of gauge cluster we wanted to run for right now in the car, and I was looking over the wiring diagrams for the stock Honda Civic and I realized that most of the data, tach, speedometer, a lot of the warning lights, the check engine light, coolant temperature, on and on, all of those are actually sent over data, and it's the same data line that the OBD2 connector uses. So I went ahead and took apart the dash harness. This is the harness that connects to the fuse box. That's what all these green plugs are. The junction connectors, all that stuff. So I found the two dash connectors, which are gray connectors, and they're wrapped in duct tape, which is kind of weird. But when I cut these out of the harness, I realized that this whole harness that connects these two to the rest of the car is actually one harness. So it doesn't interfere with any of the other wires in there. I didn't actually have to cut any wires to get this harness out of the rest of the harness. It's just taped in there. So I removed all the tape. I was able to get this thing out. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 connectors on this harness. There's one at the brightness, the dash light brightness control right here. There's the two connectors that go into the two gauge clusters, and this one is the speedometer, this one's the tachometer. This has a lot of the information, the warning lights and stuff like that. This one, I believe, does the coolant temperature and the fuel gauge. Anyways, what I've done here, I did twist these two together. This one was already twisted together, and this is the actual data line. So this carries all that OBD2 information right here, and it comes twisted together inside the harness, so it's pretty easy to find. But basically, this connector right here is the main one that I cut off, and this comes out of the junction box under the dash. It's that box that has like a whole bunch of plugs plugged into it, and that's essentially, it replaces a splice. So instead of having inline splices where, say, one wire needs to feed two different devices, so they would solder the wires together, like I've done here, they run them into a junction box. So that's where this came from. And I'm just going to go through and say what each of these wires was and kind of what we did with them to make this thing work as an OBD2 plug-in. So basically, most of the important information that we need to see, I'll be able to actually take these wires right here, connect to an OBD2 connector, and then we'll plug it into our OBD2 port, and it will make the gauges work. We're going to get our power and ground from the OBD2 connector, we're going to get our data line from the OBD2 connector, and maybe a couple other things I can't remember right now. But right here, this is the main one, the junction connector. And I will start right here with pin 1, which actually does not have anything in it. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. So, pin 1 is right there. It has nothing in it. It's in the upper left-hand corner. Pin number 2 is this light green wire. And if memory serves me correctly, I'm going to cheat. That is the parking brake wire. Pin number 3 is gone. Pin number 4 is the dark green wire, and that wire is the brake fluid switch, or the brake fluid level switch. So if the brake fluid gets low, that wire goes to ground, I believe, and it lets you know with a warning light on the dash that your brake fluid is low. The yellow wire right there, I believe that's actually the coolant, or sorry, not the coolant, but the outside temperature sensor. So this is the sensor that's mounted up, I want to say it's definitely somewhere on the front of the car. It's a little gray sensor, it's about like that long, And yeah, so the blue and the yellow wires right there actually go out to that sensor. The very thin red wires, those are actually the dash lights. It's the ground side of the dash lights, so the dash lights receive a constant 12 volt through this gray wire, which is the next wire. That's fuse number 14 in the under dash fuse box. And when you turn the dash lights on, or when you turn the parking lights on, it actually grounds these red wires. Instead of supplying 12 volts to the circuit, it grounds the circuit, turning the lights on. These two wires are actually supposed to be connected together, which is why they go into the junction box, and that's why I actually cut them up high where the two met, up here in the harness. And you can see right there that I soldered them together and heat shrinked them. So if you end up doing this yourself, when you take the tape off, find the two thin red wires. Whoa. Find the two thin red wires and just solder them together. That's actually exactly what the junction box does. Like I said before, instead of them splicing those wires together like they did right here, or like I did right here, they actually go into the junction box all the way down there, and then they connect. It basically just shorts those two pins together. So we've basically done the same thing here, just by connecting them straight together. The next wires are, let's see, the gray was the 12 volt supply to the dash light circuit. So what I did with that one is, instead of running its own fuse and everything like that, the way that I'm going to set up the wiring on the vehicle side, it'll be more than adequate to supply power to both the gauge cluster and the light dimmer circuit. So what I did is I tied the two together. The white wire right here, the white wire is a battery constant, it's fused. I tied that in together with the gray wire, and each of these gauge clusters receives, has its own white wire, but they both came down here. Actually, they went to two different switches, because one can like supplies power to the other thing. Anyways, tie these two the two white wires together right there, and make sure that you don't get it confused with the red and the white wire. That would be bad. So you'll find two brown wires and you'll find two white wires. One's coming from each cluster. Make sure you go ahead and solder those together. Back to the plug here. There's the red. So the red wire, the red wire after the gray wire, the red and the white wire are those two data wires. So those two wires are the wires that were twisted together from the factory. The next wire is white also, and that is this white wire that we spliced together. I was just talking about a minute ago. We go to the bottom half of the plug. I'm going to bend these back so it's easier to see. Alright. So on the bottom half of the plug, we have this orange wire. And that orange wire is, I believe, from the cruise control circuit. So that wire connects directly to one of the buttons on the steering wheel for the cruise control. The yellow wire, the thin gauge yellow wire, thin gauge orange wire, and thin gauge, it's actually like a light green or a gray wire. All three of those connect to three buttons on the steering wheel for the cruise control. I'm just gonna tie those off for now because we're not too worried about cruise control right now. The next wire is the brown wire, and that brown wire is the brown wire from over here. That is ignition power. That's there. That's the blue wire from the outside temperature sensor. The red wire, that thin gauge red wire, that's the red wire, that's the ground for the dash light circuit. Those are the two that I told you to tie together. The yellow wire is from the cruise control circuit, and we already talked about that one. The purple wire is, what was the purple wire? Purple wire, the purple wire is from the fuel tank. That's from the fuel level sending unit. The purple and the orange wire, both of those go back to the fuel sender and let the gauge cluster know how much gas is left. So the orange wire and the greenish wire, those are both cruise control buttons, and then this last wire right here is part of the immobilizer system. Since we've disabled the immobilizer system on this vehicle by using the HON data to unprogram the immobilizer, allowing us to start the vehicle without the immobilizer antenna and the chipped key and all that stuff, that's actually what that pink wire is for. That that flashes the little green key light on the dash when there's any kind of immobilizer code or anything like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Basically, I'm gonna hook the temperature sensor up just for fun. It'll tell us how cold it is outside the vehicle. That's not gonna go to the OBD2 port. The fuel level, that's obviously gonna go to our gas tank to let us know how much gas we have left. The red and the white wires, those are going to go to our OBD2 connector, and that's going to carry most of our information. And the yellow, grayish, green, and orange wires, those go to the steering wheel. We're not going to hook them up because we're not doing cruise control, and that basically just turns the cruise control lights on and off, so we don't really need those lights anyways. The parking brake wire, the light green one, that's actually going to go to our parking brake when we have one. The light green wire is going to go to a brake fluid level once we have one. The brown wire is going to go to the ignition switch, which will actually be an ignition relay, and it's going to turn the gauge cluster on when the ignition switch is turned to the ignition position. The white wire receives fused 12 volts at all times, and the other ones I didn't talk about, these were actually connected to a small green plug right here, and the blue wire is the left turn signal. So this is what flashes the little light on your dash. It also clicks a relay inside that gauge cluster, and that relay kind of simulates the sound, that click, click, click sound that you hear when you usually turn your blinker on. It's not actually used to turn the blinkers off and on, but it is used just to make the sound. And then the green wire is your right turn signal. And I think that's it, other than the ground wires, which I'll tie all of those together and ground them. And then again the pink wire, which we're just gonna forget about. So that's it.